Hey guys.
Hey.
Joey.
Hey, I'm Joey.
I'm Calista.
And I'm Mickayla. And we're some music nerds. And we're going to talk about Frankenstein and some romantic periods.
Heck yeah. So the Romantic period was between the 1830s and the 1900s. And the Romantic period was a time where composers, artists, and authors moved away from the formal restraint of the classical period. In literature, authors like Byron Scott, Wordsworth, and Goethe led the way. In the musical world, composers such as Weber, Schubert, Schumann, Chopin, Liszt, Berlioz, and Wagner were heavyweights of Romantic period music.
That's a lot of composers.
That is a lot of composers. And the Weber is not Dr. Weber.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's not Dr. Weber, even though he is a...
Well, that would be
He is a
fine
fine composer.
Yeah.
Weber.
Look his music up on
Weber,
Spotify.
yeah,
please.
more German. He's German. Yeah, he's German. Is he German?
I thought he was Austrian.
Maybe he is Austrian.
We don't know. Anyway.
What's the difference?
It's fine. Tomato, you know what I'm saying?
That's Italian.
All right.
We're going to cut some of that out.
Italy was strong in the Baroque era. This is romantic.
true.
We're looking at Paris and Vienna.
I've been to Vienna. It's very nice. Anyways, some key features that we see a lot in the Romantic period is we see a lot of emotional expression, and we also see a lot of, especially in paintings, like with artists, we see a lot of nature, like landscapes. And then there was also, we see a lot of, in music, we see a lot of range of dynamics and pitch. And in music, we also see a lot of nationalism also.
There was also increased chromaticism.
Yes.
And
lots of chromaticism.
and varied motif. I don't know, like just the range.
Yeah, the range is very...
Things are more chromatic and very
Mm-hmm.
changey, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like the amount of how much keys change and. Like,
But so with that, like with Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, this book was written within the Romantic period, and it is romantic in nature. What we have for you today is a composition written by
me, I did it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And let me tell you guys, this composition is sickening. It sounds so cool, and it is very chromatic, and you'll hear that. And I like it.
It gets chromatic.
Yeah.
And so basically, like what our goals for this piece was to base it off of like program music. And so what program music is like, because some composers in the Romantic period use their music to try and describe a certain place, item, person, or idea. It was a composition written in this descriptive way, and they called it program music. And it is instrumental and has no words, and composing a song with a motif.
Motifs may be a specific character or a specific place or event that
It's
the
kinda
song keeps
like
alluding to.
It's kind of like a theme. It's like your theme of music. In each story you have, there's always a theme or a main idea, and I feel like a motif in a way in music is kind of like the main idea, I guess.
Schumann does it a lot.
Yes.
Like in Winterreise, he has that same motif of looking back
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very true.
to when
A
everything
modern-
bad happened.
A modern example that probably everyone would understand is Harry Potter,
Mm-hmm.
because you have Hedwig's theme, which is the basic like Harry Potter theme song that everybody
knows.
Yes.
Yes.
And so that would be an example of a motif.
Mm-hmm. And then we have an example of...
Jurassic Park.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's also
That
a
is
good
also,
one. Star Wars.
Star
Wars.
Star Wars, that's an example.
But if we look at examples of program music, we have Romeo and Juliet by
Tchaikovsky.
Yes.
And Tchaikovsky is the composer of also Swan Lake and Sleeping Beauty.
Russian, by the way, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Yes.
Super Russian.
Yes. And what he did with Romeo and
seems weird.
Yeah.
And what he did with Romeo and Juliet is he created motifs for both Romeo and Juliet, together, and he wrote them in a gentle and lyrical way, and he did a motif for the Montagues and Capulets. Theirs are very fast and syncopated, and it's to illustrate the hatred between the two families.
But also, if you look at the theme of Romeo and Juliet, they are very much so different. And in the score of Romeo and Juliet that Tchaikovsky wrote, you can see within the themes that they're very, I don't know, they're very different, but they're very similar. And just like in like the Montagues and the Capulets, even though they're different to the, like in their own eyes, they're the same. Really, I don't know if that makes sense.
They're distinct from each other, but yet their qualities are very similar.
Yes, thank you. That's the proper wording I was looking for. So if we're looking at the composers of the Romantic period, so we have Tchaikovsky and we have Beethoven.
Beethoven, yeah.
Obviously.
And, yeah, I'm like,
The
Beethoven
most famous
is
one.
the most famous one that almost everybody knows. And I don't know, he's probably my favorite, I think. If I had to pick one, I think he's my favorite. Not just because he's the famous one and everyone knows him, but when we read his Will and Testament in class, and he talked about his virtue, and that if it wasn't like for his art and for like his music, I feel like, I don't know, that is what spoke to me a lot, and that's why I think he's one of my favorites, is just because he didn't let something like his like becoming deaf stop him.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we see a lot in the Romantic period, especially within all of the composers, is they all have some sort of story, like, behind why they love music or why they chose music or whatnot.
Cool.
But
the other side of that coin that Beethoven had, which is also very similar to the monster in Frankenstein, is since science was developing, everybody now was less religious and had to find a way to cope with their mortality.
Yes.
Which the monster doesn't necessarily have to deal with his mortality specifically, but he has to deal with the fact that he is alive and that he's this disgusting thing that no one wants to see.
no one.
Why he's alive, which is what Beethoven struggled with a lot, and he was very self-deprecating and the biggest critic of himself, really, which is what we also see in the monster. Once he's denied humanity.
Yeah.
And immediately too with that, because that's one of the reasons I chose to start the song how I did, is because I thought about starting it. This a little bit of music jargon for people that don't know music. I thought about starting in a major key, which is a happy key, because initially he was alive and found out he was alive and wanted something good, but he didn't really find anything good. So I thought immediately, instead, I changed to have it start in a minor key, which is like sad and very lonely feeling, and immediately establish that motif.
And I feel like we also see that type of, like how you said, when the monster wants, like when he becomes alive, he's looking for, something so he doesn't feel so lonely, and I feel like with Beethoven, I feel like in a lot of composers, we see at some point where they have that loneliness and they're trying to find something in life. And I feel like Beethoven found that within his music. And I feel like we see that within his music, as well as like when he started going deaf. I think in some of his music, we see that he goes to a lot of, in his compositions, we see a lot of minor keys pop up. And I feel like that kind of what you're going off of shows, I don't know if that makes sense. Like it shows in his music, like how that's where we start to see that emotional expression within music, which is what part of what romanticism is within music or art, or even literature, like in poems, and yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but like different poems or music.
We see poems like William Blake.
Yes, but I feel like that's where where that expressionism, where we see emotion within these pieces, whether it's about nature, whether it's about really nothing, because these instrumental pieces don't have words, but you hear it. So we have major keys that sound happy, or we have minor keys that sound sad, and I feel like that gives a composer some leeway to kind of express how either they are feeling or really what they are seeing, or whether they want to express something but don't want to say that.
And it's kind of open to interpretation too. With this piece, we were trying to convey of like the monster's loneliness and kind of like his wandering, right? Of like how he just like wanders after like being created. And with the whole like theme of like nature, because the monster is like kind of this manifestation of nature before being corrupted by mankind.
Yes.
And so he's influenced by a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But and it's kind of sad how Victor doesn't take responsibility.
He doesn't take responsibility for it. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of where we start to see the piece kind of unfold. So going back to William Blake.
Yeah.
William Blake was a poet.
Mm-hmm. He was also a painter.
He also was anti-church,
but pro-Jesus.
Which is interesting. Because at first, Blake wasn't really popular. Like, a lot of people at first, they kind of dismissed his work, really.
Right.
It was largely neglected at first, and now he's a very well-known English poet. Like what you were saying earlier about how he... What was it?
He wanted... so with Blake, he feels that you need to experience life to find balance within yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that we see a little bit in Frankenstein as well.
Well, at first, Blake's whole thing is, like, because he rejected the Baroque and neoclassical idea of needing to be restrained. And the monster wasn't restrained in a way, but he was, like, the opposite. So he was kind of like Blake in the sense where he went off to go enjoy life for what it was. And he was, like, because he had that whole period where he was just off in the world by himself, which was lonely, but he read some Milton. He spied on a family, to...
Oh, yes. My favorite pastime.
Yeah.
Now, while the monster doesn't really go out and find balance, well, what I'd call balance, he kind of, by the end of the book, realizes that he has no place in the world, and he's going to go off himself, to put it nicely, I guess. As nice as you could put it.
Yeah.
Disappear.
Disappear into the great North Arctic.
The great unknown. The great abyss.
I guess in a way, because he does that, he does find his way in the world, and that he doesn't really have one.
Which
Because
that's so
he's
sad
this
to say.
Pure nature, but yet unnatural thing to the world.
Yeah.
Because he's created, and then
Right.
he's like, oh, I've learned all these things. I've also killed a bunch of people. Now I decide I don't have any place in this world anymore.
Exactly.
And it's like he didn't actually get a chance to live very much, because he didn't have the guidance in order to I don't know.
That's interesting that you bring up killing people, because that's part of the programmatic music part of the song that I had.
Yeah.
After every kill, I made the music a little less complex.
Wow.
Took notes away? Is that what you said?
took some notes away, made it a little less complex, and so then that's representing how both the monster and Victor have less of themselves and what they hoped for what the creation of the entity would be, in a sense. The monster had hoped that Victor would accept him and not make him Satan, as he refers to when talking to Victor, and instead making his Adam. But as soon as he kills Victor's brother, once he does that, once he kills his first kill, the potential of that happening are basically gone.
But didn't the monster kill because the monster killed Victor's like family and friends because Victor refused to create a female, right?
Well, I think like also because it was like kind of the monster's way of getting revenge a little bit because like even though because Victor is so whiny and he's like, oh, I'm by myself, but you also had like also had all these people,
yeah,
and he kind of took his relationship with them for granted, and so the monster was like, I'm gonna take all of these people away from you so you can feel how I feel with this loneliness that I have now bestowed upon you. Yeah.
I also added that too, where
did you
with also his first kill, I added just a hint of a major key of the major key that I was in,
a little happy,
just because he it's not necessarily happy, but it's satisfying. That the monster kills.
That's I like that.
So it's a nice cadence, nice end of a phrase.
Going back to like that loneliness that the monster feels and that Victor feels also, I feel. When looking at the cover of the book, that's a painting.
Yeah.
And that painting is by, remind me the name?
Casper David Friedrich.
Right. And in that we just see a man standing on a mountain.
Standing above the fog.
Yeah. By himself. Like lonely.
That is the title.
Yeah. Yes.
I looked.
Is it? Okay. Thank you. I didn't know the exact title.
It's on the PowerPoint that they sent out for class. Yeah, I have it pulled up right here.
Heck yeah.
So I picked this artist to talk about because I thought it was like interesting because it was also on the cover of our book. And Casper David Friedrich is a landscape painter, and he is best known for his later like allegorical landscapes, which feature contemplative figures silhouetted against night skies, morning mists, barren trees, and Gothic ruins. And his primary interest as an artist was the contemplation of nature, and his often symbolic and anti-classical work seeks to convey the spiritual experiences of life. And so I think that kind of like fitted with the aesthetic, I guess, of the book.
Yeah, and even not only the book, but also what the romantic period is.
Yeah,
like he does landscapes, he does nature, and with even just looking at the cover of this book, you have not only a landscape of a man by himself standing above the fog, but also I feel like you get that sense of emotion as well because he's alone and he's in pretty much the middle of nowhere. We have no idea where he's at, and you have no idea what he's thinking. He could be thinking of offing himself. Like,
that is what occurs to me after reading Frankenstein.
Yes.
Yes. And the North Sea.
And yes. That's what I was getting to, Joey.
Yeah.
But thanks for that, Joey.
Yeah, no problem. That's what I'm here for.
So if we were to look at like the different things that we see within the book, I feel like one of the things I got, like one of the themes that I feel like is in there is alienation. Just because Victor chose to pretty much alienate himself because of his want and desire for knowledge. I don't know. I find that interesting. Like his want and desire for knowledge kind of drove him to, I feel like, create the monster. You know, if that makes sense. But I feel like with that alienation, I felt like a part of him wanting to create, which we talked about this earlier, that he wanted to create the creature or monster to not feel alone, even though he had family and friends. And I feel like that might be and I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know. This is just how I took it. I took it as he created this monster to not feel as alone. Because I feel like everyone at some point in their life has that moment where they feel like alone. Like when we talked about earlier, Beethoven and his, like in his will and testament about how he talks about his virtue and his art is what, saved him from offing himself.
Well, and also too, like he once he went deaf, like he kind of isolated himself.
Yes.
Because it was hard to have conversations, and he would just avoid conversations in general.
And it was even hard to do the one thing that he loved to do, which was write music. And he couldn't, like, I know that when he started becoming deaf, he would place his hands on the piano just to feel the keys and or the vibration of the piano when it was being played.
Well, you know, I bet he also didn't know ASL, so that made things a little difficult.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm like, it was back in the day. It's probably no one knew ASL.
America
Yeah.
wasn't that much of a thing
No.
at the time.
No,
Not at all.
but I
Well,
love
not
that, like,
the
he...
U.S.
I love that he, in the end, he was just like, I'm gonna pour out my soul, like, or I'm gonna pour out my talent. And, like, I'm just gonna compose music until I can't compose it anymore.
Yes.
I'm
And
gonna give...
love that.
Yeah.
I think that is super important for everyone, really.
Yeah.
Whether you're a poet, whether you're a athlete, whether you're whatever. I'm like, as long as you have that drive and you're passionate about something, whether you create a monster or you create some music, I'm like, as long as it's cool, I mean, when you like and it makes you happy, I feel like that's all that matters, really.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what we see within Victor, is he had this desire for knowledge, and he kept going, and he ended up creating a monster.
And the monster too at that.
And yeah, so
And he loves, like, you know, science. And, like, I feel like how I took it was, like, he created the monster because he wanted to do the impossible. Because, like, who can create a human out of just
scientific, yeah.
things? Like, you know, like, it's impossible. Like, but he wants
Can
to
you imagine someone doing that, like, today?
With chemistry,
Ooh.
as all the book tells us.
Exactly. It's just it's
Yeah.
chemistry. That's all you need.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
All the stuff you guys are talking about, that's also why the motif is how it is. The da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-dum. Like switching between that and, like, not really being in a key and being chromatic, just, like, the longing for something else and the yearning for knowledge and being human.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And I feel like, and when you say that of being human, like, I feel like that we see that again within the monster, because when he was created, I feel like he also wanted that desire for not really, I mean, yes, probably knowledge, but I feel like of having a real life, a part of him, because I don't know if I was to see a monster, I don't know, I feel like a monster like that, the way he is portrayed in the book, I don't really see it as a monster. I feel like it would be more like as if someone came back from the dead. Like,
I mean, that'd be kind of terrifying.
It would
Yeah.
be.
It's not really depicted to us now, like in any movies or anything, like how
Yeah.
it actually describes it in the book.
Yeah, because, like, we see, like, when we think of Frankenstein,
we see
we
this
think, like, bolts
green
in the
we-
neck,
monster.
green,
We think of the
Exactly.
monsters,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
But then what's
exactly.
sad
which is not accurate.
No.
We call it the monster, their creation, because it doesn't have a name.
Exactly.
And so by
the
not
entity,
giving,
I guess,
the entity
That's a
is
good
most
one.
really
And-
good.
like, by not giving it a name,
Mm-hmm.
do we even deem it as a person?
I guess not necessarily, but also that's because, you know, that's a good point, because if it's like any really living thing has a name, whether it's a plant, whether it's an animal, it all has a name. So I like that kind of idea.
Now you're getting into late romantic stuff
Okay.
and civil
Oof.
rights.
Ooh.
Yeah. I guess in America that was late romantic. It was a bit earlier with everyone else. And well, even just touching more on civil rights, what you said with defying classical ideas and Baroque ideas, that was their thing. Was in the Baroque and classical, they were like, they started these ideas of all men are created equal and all this and that, but they didn't really mean it because they still owned slaves and they still did not treat women that great.
Exactly. Well,
And
When you say
Romanticism
that-
tried very desperately sometimes to step away from that.
Well, when you say that, like, when looking back at even music, and I'm sure artists as well, you don't see very many female composers like in the Romantic period. You don't see a lot. We know of like Clara Schumann. We know of
Right.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly. And she's covered up by her more well-known,
Husband.
arguably less talented husband.
Exactly.
Poor
And
Robert.
yeah.
Arguably. You
Well,
know, depends on the person, depends on what you like.
Yeah,
but
and well, even with the so when looking at the Schumanns, Claire Schumann wrote multiple. I'm pretty sure she even went to school for music as well as her husband in Vienna. I'm pretty positive.
yeah, she was a prodigy.
And even her, because back then, since women weren't looked at as being, oh, you shouldn't be a composer. Leave that to the men. But in the Romantic period, like, women were frowned upon when it came to making music or even playing music. I knew Clara played
Piano. She played piano. She was very well known as a child piano prodigy, and which is why she met Robert, and they kind of got together again because he was a bit older. He was in his mid-20s, and she was only 17.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Which, I mean, normal for the time.
And he even forbid her to compose music again. Like, when they got married, he told her, like, she wasn't allowed to compose music, play music, any of that. And I feel like, honestly, he was wrong for that because her music is quite delightful and is honestly better than his, like you said earlier.
Well, England really got into civil rights in early-ish Romantic. It was like the 1830s when they really started. As in America, it didn't really start to really go until 1860s, which was almost a new era of the arts. Since you've brought up Claire Schumann and women and talked about it more intensely, that also brings up what isn't in the composition, just like what isn't in Frankenstein. Femininity.
Yes.
Yes, because she writes about all men.
All men.
Yeah,
No women.
I tried to avoid any kind of a comfortable feeling or key in the song. Everything's very set and minor. There's no real satisfaction except for when the monster's reminiscing or briefly when he's looking at the family. Because I set up to where there's a different key which is, for those who don't know, the note which the other sounds are kind of based off of. It's like the root of what's happening at the time. I set that as a different note, different key for the different locations that they're in. So they start in Ingolstadt, which is where Frankenstein first creates him. Then he runs off because Victor immediately doesn't like him and is immediately freaked out. Then he goes to the French family and off into the woods, so I switched the key there. Then brought up to a major, to a happy key, because he was satisfied and he was happy that he got to, in this weird, separated way, interact with the family, and then have that torn away from him and have it back to a minor key.
So, with that being said, that there was no really any type of female really in the book, why she mostly wrote about men?
Well, I think maybe it's because like it shows like the need for
femininity.
No, I like that because the reason I think that she didn't put any women or femininity, whatever, however
Feminine characters.
Yes, feminine
females.
Yeah, females, women in this book, is because I feel like men. I'm trying to word it to where it doesn't sound.
I'm listening.
It's like, it's in a way men need women.
I can't
All
decide if I
men.
should sound sarcastic or
I
not.
know. I'll put it in the Romantic period. Men needed women because men couldn't survive without women.
You know, yeah.
In a sense, because
making kids.
Exactly. Well,
making
because back
clothes,
then,
taking care of the
women,
house.
yeah, that's how women were looked at as caregivers.
That is something that the monster doesn't have.
Exactly.
A caregiver.
He doesn't have someone that could take care of him, and so when he asks Victor for a female companion, Victor doesn't give that to him. And he gets very angry, and I think that's another reason why he doesn't, like, that's why the monster took revenge by killing his friends and family, because he was like, you have people that love you, you know how that feels, you know, you, like, in a way it's kind of like he's telling Victor that, like, you've had that feeling of love. Like, you have people that love you.
Right.
You know that feeling, and he doesn't. Like, he's this creature that just came to life, and he has no idea who he is. He has no idea, like, really what's happening. And so he's just like, I want someone to love me for me.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, the real only feminine characters we have are Elizabeth, right, that's her name?
Mm-hmm.
And Henry.
Yeah.
And
Henry.
and both of them are killed shortly after Victor takes away the monster's ability to have a feminine a companion.
But also Victor himself does not want any feminine companionship because he's like, with Mary Elizabeth, he's like, He'd rather be locked up in his laboratory just researching and doing all the scientific
But
things.
I feel like that can sometimes be how men are.
And it's weird how emotional and whiny he is.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like,
but
in a way,
still
he's
so-
feminine. Like,
right, but still so cerebral and cold.
Yeah.
yeah. It is weird. And I think if Shelley did choose to put women in this book, I feel like this book would be completely different. Had Victor created a female companion for the monster, I feel like things would be probably a whole lot different in that story.
Mm-hmm.
We would see the monster would probably end up being happy because he has someone that loves him, takes care of him. He probably wouldn't have, offed himself.
Personally, I think the monster was already too far gone by the time they made that deal. He'd already killed. He'd already seen that he was a monster, and they
at that
both
point,
of them
it
still
was
would have been
kind of-
outcast. And
Yeah.
would she have had a choice, which plays into the femininity thing? Female repression, I guess you could say.
You mentioned like how Clairval is like kind of feminine. I mean, he is feminine, like, because
He takes care of Henry. He's thoughtful, openly thoughtful.
Yeah.
He's charismatic. He's kind.
I know at one point, like, him and Victor go off and they like go look at nature at one point, and Clairval's all, oh, look at this, it's so pretty, and Victor's like,
But I don't know. I wish I had read this book in high school because I probably would have enjoyed it just because it's not what you expect it to be. Yeah.
So, if like the composition that we composed for this would be in the Romantic period, because we decided to do this versus a musical piece,
Because I feel like this was a way for us as individuals to collaborate and express ourselves and our, I say our, but Joey's awesome talent of being.
I don't know if I go that far.
No, I would go that far. I would go that far.
It's a good composition.
But it is a good composition.
Sure.
It is. Hey,
No negativity.
Thanks.
no
in this house.
negativity.
Thanks.
We're not going to be like Beethoven. We're not going to be our harshest critic. Your stuff is great.
I guess I'm a romantic composer, so I gotta hate it, obviously.
Well, I don't hate it.
Listeners aren't supposed to hate it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't hate Beethoven, so guess we're even.
But I feel like we wanted this piece to be like as if it was in the Romantic period.
Yeah.
To give that emotional expression that we see within almost all types of romantic music, along with as well as art, literature.
Politics, even.
Yeah.
Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet is not like, it's not an opera.
No.
It's not a sonata. It's not a symphony. It's an overture, is what it was. Or is.
Right.
And so, like, if we were to make something like what Tchaikovsky did with Romeo and Juliet, Frankenstein would be an overture, and which incorporates motifs.
Right. The musical wasn't really a thing until the 20th century.
Yes.
And we wanted to, like, and we could have done it like, what if Frankenstein was a musical in, like, this day and age? But we wanted to kind of just keep it in the Romantic period because that book is romantic, and we wanted to add romantic, like,
styles too with this piece. And I feel like the way that this composition is, we have that chromaticism that we see within music from Beethoven or Tchaikovsky, or really any of those composers from the Romantic period, and as well as
we're not using that
chromaticism. The chromaticism we see within a lot of compositions, like Beethoven's and Tchaikovsky's,
and the Schumanns.
And the Schumanns, yes. But I feel like mostly we wanted this not only because we could use the chromaticism to describe, in our way, the monster. Because, Joey, you said that you based it off of the locations that the monster went to.
Yeah, following the geography that he traveled.
Yes. With that, I feel you could, if we had done that within a musical, I feel like that would be hard to be able to express that, really. In a musical, you can express emotion through dance or songs. In the end, it all ties in together. We have the emotion, we have the chromaticism, we have the geography, which later goes into nature.
But like other, like, things like Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet, you have, like, a lot of percussive things, like, to also add to, like, you know, the motif to, like, symbolize scenes. Like, for Romeo and Juliet's death, for example, he used a big cymbal crash.
Death.
And just, like, to make it sound like...
To make it more dramatic.
To make it more dramatic, and then to signal that they did. Like, they killed themselves.
They died.
Right.
And, obviously...
I did incorporate a little bit of that with all the deaths. There's a little bit. There's not so much with the father, but a few other things.
Another thing with that I like by not using instruments, because I do agree that by using instruments, you're able to show the story with these instruments. Because like the cymbal, you can crash it to make it more dramatic. They're dead. Boom, done. Or you have like flutes that have this very light, happy sound where you can, whenever Romeo's like, oh, or Juliet's whatever up in the tower, like, oh, Romeo, you could be like, like, you got little flutes going because it's all happy.
Yeah, I went ahead and decided and just stuck with piano. One, because that was easier, of course, but also because it's just a lone instrument, just like
he's
kind of alone by himself.
Yes.
So I thought about incorporating
also
other instruments because
and
the monster is this conglomerate of other parts, but so is a piano. I thought,
and I like that you say that, like, by using the piano, you're using a lone instrument that can represent this monster and Victor.
Its own whole work.
Yes.
Yes.
But I also, another thing that I feel like with just using piano, not using instruments, is it gives you the chance to hear the chromaticism. Within that, like, there's some parts where you altered some notes, and you can really hear that. We like to say that those are very crunchy notes, very spicy notes.
Yeah, we say crunchy and spicy.
No,
well, it's kind of like other, like,
It's a good
other
adjective.
pieces of work.
Yeah.
It's like other pieces of work that kind of, like, would you listen to this in your car? And I was like,
yes,
no.
I would. I totally would.
I would absolutely not listen to the Rite of Spring.
Aw.
Anyway.
Should we talk about the end?
Yes.
both how the book ends and how the composition ends.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about how the composition
Because
ends.
we're getting good on time. Well, to end it, obviously, for those that read the book,
Oof.
I mean,
You should have.
this may be public access, so some people may not have read the book. I don't know. I guess, I mean, we don't see it, but he kills Victor, as far as we know.
Yeah.
Or,
We assume.
I don't know, Victor dies off by himself because of how sickly he is. That's what happens. He dies because he's sickly, and then the monster visits him. Well, I don't know why. I don't know what I'm thinking. But yeah, once that happens, the monster visits, and then he has his resolution, kind of. So I ended up resolving it in a way, like having a nice cadence, a nice E major chord, but then it ends on, for music people, it's called a half cadence, which is kind of this. It's an empty feeling. It's
Feels incomplete.
It doesn't. It doesn't
Feels
feel complete.
da
Like it's.
da, and then there's no resolution.
Yeah, you're like crickets, chirp chirp.
Because like the idea is like of a piece, like you want it to go back home and like you like yeah,
and no resolution.
Yeah.
That's his half cadence essentially.
So it's like humming a tune and then not finishing it.
Exactly.
And it's like
it's cringy.
the rest of it.
You're like
because we don't know what happens to him. We just
Yeah,
get told
exactly.
what he does.
it's
So-
kind of like
It's
it's a
implied.
suspense.
Just like when I hear that, I could go duh and resolve it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we can assume that the monster goes off and goes and dies at the North Pole.
With Santa.
Well, we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then the implications
cadence.
of mortality, and we don't know if he can live forever, if
yeah.
he is immortal because of how he's created, or
There's a
Yeah.
lot of ifs
right.
With this, and I feel like
So,
that's a
yeah,
perfect
I wanted,
way
I wanted to
to.
establish that at the end.
Yeah, I feel like that's a perfect way to end it. Thanks for listening to our podcast.
Yeah,
we hope you enjoyed, and see ya.
Yeah.
Bye.
We're your friendly neighborhood music
Music
majors.
nerds.
Music majors, I guess. Links will be in the description, probably, for things we talked about, and a PDF of the sheet music.
Yes.
If you would like to look at it.
And I guess since I put the music at the beginning of this video, that's there too. Just rewind. Right, this is going on too long.
Okay. Well, and peace out.
Bye.
So
Civil rights.
give us 100s.
Yes, please.